Welcome, everybody. Today I'm going to share with you just a few things. The story of how we met and the story of where Project Moonhug came from. Something simple, see if you're interested in what we have. We're not here to sell anything. We're here to see if you have an interest. And then once that, we're going to describe what we're doing in Project Moonhug on a global scale and how Latvia might be able to be involved. So let's travel back in time. Not long ago, first I was in Palo Alto, was it, where we met? In Silicon Valley area. And I had just described for about an hour what was Project Moonhug. And Paul walks up and he, with another friend, says, tell me about it too. So for another hour, I sat down and shared with him a story. And from that point on, he has said, I want to be involved. So I'm going to share that story with you today. And hopefully there's something in there that sparks your interest. It was over 3 years ago. I was speaking at a conference, and when I was done, there was a guy next to me. We started talking. And at one point, he says, I work with NASA. And if you'd like to come visit NASA, I'd be glad to give you a tour. I thought, NASA? Oh my God, a tour at NASA? I'd love to. And I have an office in San Francisco, so I visit there every month. And I said, next month, why don't I go? So Bruce and I agreed on a time, and I traveled back to from Hong Kong to San Francisco. And I come to get into their offices on NASA compound. Now, I'm not a space guy. He's a space guy. I love Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, Star Trek. I've thought of going to distant lands, different worlds, but I'm a person who doesn't look up at the stars. I don't dream about stars and planets and wanting to travel. It was just an exciting opportunity to go to NASA. So I show up at NASA, and they have offices on two sides with couches in the center. So I sit down, and right next to me sits the woman who created astrobiology. The discipline of astrobiology.
What is astrobiology?
It's biology in the cosmos, outside of where we live.
So it's basically about aliens?
About
alien life forms.
Your cousins.
So Jill Tarter was there next year?
Her name is, oh no, it's not Jill Tarter, it's, oh, I know her. It'll come to me, but it's not Jill Tarter. It will come to me, sorry. So we have this conversation, and another person sits down who works with the space prizes, the SpaceX competitions, and then the guy I'm with is public-private partnerships for the United States and around the world for NASA. And we talked for 3 hours. I had an amazing time. They didn't realize my background was organic chemistry, physics, calculus, straight A's in organic chemistry, that I loved to draw, paint, and sculpt. I had a lot of these interests. So we started talking, and they told me things that were amazing. One of them was, I didn't know there was water on the moon. Some of you may know that, some of you don't know. But what they did is they had some spectroscopy go by the moon, and they were able to capture, with a plume that they sent up, they were able to capture that there were particles of ice crystals on the moon. So they knew that there's water on the moon, which means there's hydrogen and oxygen, which means we have the ability to do or live on the moon using resources we didn't know happened. They shared with me, they asked me a question, and I don't know if you know this, but where does platinum come from?
Platinum?
Not you. You've heard the story. I thought, I don't know where you think it comes from, but I thought it came from mining. And they said, no. Platinum doesn't come from Earth. It comes from meteors.
Which come from supernovas.
Which come from but they come from meteors. I didn't know that. Remember, I'm sitting in this room. I know nothing about space. You obviously know a lot more than I did. And I said to them, I think that's amazing. And they started describing what platinum's used for and how many resources there are out there. And then they said, so when you look at the moon, what do you see? And you see craters from asteroids hitting, millions of asteroids. They say on the moon, just one asteroid that they've been able to identify has more platinum in it, in one, and there's been millions, than we've used in the history of mankind. If we took that same asteroid, it's a metal asteroid, we can make every bridge on Earth out of stainless steel. that there are resources that we had never thought about. And I thought that was amazing. This is great. We spoke for over 3 hours about how NASA functions improperly, what are their connections, what are their drives, and how these people just want to get into space. They are space fanatics. I thought that was fun, but we spent 3 hours and I never got the tour. So they said, if you come back next month, we'll give you a tour. So I come back next month, I sit down, and the guy next to me is head of communications. 2 other people sit down, and for 3 hours, we talk about everything else in space. And I didn't get a tour. So they said, if you come back again, which I did the next month, I learned, I'm smart. 3 times, I didn't sit down. And this time, they gave me a tour. And they actually turned on for me the flight simulator that the astronauts learned to fly the shuttle in. And I thought that was cool. They said they never do it for anybody. But while I got into the seat, a guy says, why don't we turn it on for you? So they turn it on. After we're done, I go to this place called Scratch. It's a restaurant, and we're sitting with Bruce and myself, and he's sharing with me all the challenges in space. And he's listing them one after another after another. And he gets to one point and he says, one of the challenges we have in space is what happens if a woman gets pregnant. It's 1/6 gravity on the moon, and a baby, if it ever came back to Earth, its bones won't be able to sustain it, and a baby might die. And I had enough at that point. I looked at him and said, I can solve several of the things you're talking about, but let's just talk about this one. And he looks at me like, we're NASA. Who are you? And I said, if a woman gets pregnant on the moon, send her blank home. Well, the astrobiologist, Harper is her last name, she said to me, well, we might have challenges with our cells reproducing, but that wasn't the point. I said, send her home. You're trying to solve 1,000 Rubik's Cubes at once. You know Rubik's Cubes? Everybody knows Rubik's Cubes? I had my cufflinks on, so I brought a little Rubik's Cube. So that's my cufflinks piece. I rolled them up. And I said, I'm normally hired by organizations around the world to come up with solutions that people don't think about. For example, I've worked with the CEOs of Maersk and Infosys and Wipro and Illinois Toolworks, major companies, as well as small companies and technology companies. So I said, if I had to do it, this is the way I would do it. I said, the first thing we have to do, phase 1, is put a box with a roof on the moon. What's called proof of concept. We have to prove that we can get on the moon. Once we get on the moon, venture will open up, money will flow, people will see it's possible to get onto the moon. And I said, it's like the Roger Bannister of space. Roger Bannister, for some of you who might not know, was the guy who broke the 4-minute mile. It was considered physiologically and psychologically impossible to run faster than the 4 minutes. And one guy, Roger Bannister, broke it. And within a few months, several people broke it. It was almost like, well, now he can do it, we can do it. Well, if we get onto the moon, we'll have people say, well, I want to be the first wine on the moon. I want to be the first perfume on the moon. I want to be the first power tool. I can imagine the first photograph of a man and woman walking in Tranquility Bay would be given out for Valentine's Day around the world. Everybody would say, that's the gift, that's the card. We could change the way we think. I said, that would be the first thing. Then after that, what we have to do is we have to move to an industrial park. And he looked at me, industrial park. I said, I don't know why people talk about entertainment and research. It's not sustainable. We need to create one building, rent it out to people, to corporations. They would come in and do material sciences and try to come up with new technologies that they can make and sell to Earth. Perfume. Perfume would smell different, created in microgravity or on the moon, and sell it back to Earth. Whatever it may be, it could be mining, it could be liquor, it could be pharmaceuticals, but something we can start creating a trade route. I said the third phase, and it's going to be tough living. I mean, this is going to be like living in a submarine, and if you know anything about submarines, you used to have a bed, then someone would get out, and the next person gets in, the next person gets in, and they keep on keeping. It's called a hot bunk. The bed is always warm. And I said the next phase is what's called an industrial park. I mean, is an extended stay. And that would be these people now get a nice hotel. shared services. And I told them, I don't know why we have all of these little buildings all over the place. Why don't we have a building and a building? And this would be, you'd have a room, 1.5 meters by 2 meters. That's your space. But it would be nicer than the other bunk. And that's where we'd live and work, and maybe another manufacturing facility would set up. The last phase would be community. I don't think we're going to see in real soon all of these little people living on the moon and all over the place. It's going to have to grow sustainably. And I said those would be the 4 phases. We have to work on that and create a space-based economy. We have to do trade routes. And he looked at me and he said, how are you envisioning this? I said, well, let's go back to old days, history. When an industrialist, a king or a queen or a group of individuals wanted to venture out, they put together some money, built some boats, they traveled to some distant land, and when they found something that was valuable, it could be a resource of some type, they left some people behind, gave them some supplies, and said, we'll be back. Now, being back is not like today's time. Being back is 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. And they would travel back, and 2 things happened. When they got to the new land, the people said, oh my God, I want to be a part of this. I want those resources. I want to make money. I'm a capitalist. Or I think I should own that. So new venture, people started to put funding in. They started to believe that there's something out there. Now when they went back, most people died. That was the case. Everybody dies, except for just a few. And what they did is they brought resources and they started to create a trade route. Well, we have to do the same thing with the moon. We don't need to be self-sustaining. We don't have to have every bit of food and water and vegetables and everything to grow it. We can trade it with the moon. That would be a trade route. And on Earth, we have to develop these technologies. And he said, well, who's going to pay for this? And I said, we all are, and we're all not. But governments can't do it. I said, when it relies on governments, we're going to have a lot of challenges. It will not get there. Governments can help, but they won't be the founding component. I said, what will happen is, what we're going to do is, we're going to go to a company like Caterpillar. Now, Caterpillar, they do the earth-moving machinery. I said, Caterpillar might want to be engaged in space. He says, they are interested in space. I said, maybe mining, remote mining. He says, exactly, they want to do remote mining. They want to do remote mining on Earth too. What if we could, using big data, find them customers? So go to, instead of spending $1 billion themselves, we can go to Caterpillar and say, we found you 9 customers you didn't know about. Maybe these people would love their technology, or their technology can go into theirs. And find an ecosystem, help to decrease their cost. So if Caterpillar had 10 customers, they can then go to their shareholders and say, we're investing in this technology. It's now not $1 billion, but it's $100 million, and they could do it. And later on, he called it stone soup. You know it as axe soup, but similar type of story, that we're all contributing to something and creating an ecosystem. And after we're done, he looks at me and says, what are you doing in 2 weeks? And I said, I'm going to be in my home in Hong Kong. He says, no, you're not. You're going to Hawaii. I said, no, I'm going to Hong Kong. He says, no, you've got to go to Hawaii. The top 50 people in space are going to be there. And I want you to meet the person, these people. Buzz Aldrin will be there. The guy who put the satellite, the rover onto the comet just recently from France. He will be there. I said, I'm not going. He says, by the way, David, we don't need a box with a roof. We need a box with a roof and a door, a home. So I go back to Hong Kong, and I have a Slovakian who runs my office. She's amazing. And she says, I tell her the story, and she sounds like my grandmother, except she's gorgeous. My grandmother came from Hungary, so she's Hungarian. And I told her the story. She says, no, you're going. I said, no, I'm not going. She says, trust me, it's NASA, you're going. She changed my plans, and I ended up going to this event. And there were some amazing people there. However, I didn't understand a word they were talking about. They speak in code. Everything's in code. So if I was typing the entire first day trying to figure out what L2 and L4 and what a dragon is. I didn't know we had dragons, but we have dragons. There's SpaceX is Dragon. So they're using technologies I didn't understand, and I realized one reason we're not engaged in space on Earth is because we don't understand it. It's for the techno people. And I started asking some serious questions of the group, and they couldn't answer them. They were so far away from all of us that I couldn't have a conversation. And as the days went on, well, the first day, one guy says, "Why are you here?" I said, "I'm here because I was told to come." He says, you should be at like a fun event. This is not fun." By the end of the event, what happened was I'm sitting next to Bruce, and I lean over and I say, "Are these the people who can get us to the moon?" And he looks at me. It's a good question. And then he waits, and he waits, and he waits, and he says, looking around, "No." Thinking, no. These are the guys who put up the space shuttle. These are the guys who are doing all the newest technology. So I said, "Can some of them get us to the moon?" Maybe. And I said, "I'm being presumptuous here. Do you think I can get us to the moon?" And I'm not a moon guy, remember. I'm still not a moon guy. And he says, "Yes." And I said, "Let's put together a team." And from 3 years ago, from that point on, we started working together on how to be able to get a box with a roof and a door on the moon and create a space-based economy using a variety of different means. So after this event, I went to something called the National Pioneering Space Summit. In the United States, it was the first time ever they brought 100 people together, the top people in space, meaning there were 6 astronauts there, and there were administrators there, and it was really cool. And everybody went around, the 100 people, and had to say their history, and people had CVs like this. And when they got to me, I said, "I'm David Goldsmith, I'm here to help." Because I don't have anything to offer except for my ability to think. And I found the same thing I did at the Next Giant Leap conference, where I felt like it was disconnected from my world. So these were space people, but they weren't our people. They weren't us learning about space. And we're not going to get there unless our entire community starts to think differently. So I left that event, and we made the connection with Stone Soup that we're going to create a big data solution. And Bruce said to me, he told me a little different story, and to save time, he basically analogized it to how Silicon Valley's companies start up. They do the exact same thing. They get together, they don't know what they're doing, they put their resources together, and they start a company. Probably not unlike you guys. You found each other, said, "We'll put our resources, we're going to put our time in, we're going to build something," and eventually they've got 400,000 euro from the European Space Agency. Now, I only use the full names. I don't use acronyms, because that's space. And they were able to receive that money because I don't understand these acronyms. So they've got money to put into their research. After that happened, things started to change. We started to look at what are the obstacles in our way. One of them is language. We don't know how to talk with one another. We don't know how to share a conversation about space. And to most of us, it's space. And yet, if you really think about it, you're all in space right now. You're engaged in space right now. How would you be engaged in space? How are you engaged in space right now?
We are producing.
What?
We are circuits for space.
What?
We are producing semiconductors that are flying into space.
Okay. What else? But everyone in the room right now is engaged in space-related activities.
We live in a planet that's...
I live in space.
We live in space. You all have cell phones, mobiles on you. That's space. We get weather from forecaster, that's space. We have communication systems, space. We have so many, the space industry is over 400 billion. There's different numbers that I've seen, between 250 billion to $300 billion, $400 billion a year. There's a lot going on in space. So you're engaged in space right now, you just don't know it. You take out your phone and you use it. So the conversation started to change, and what I also found was I had no way to talk to individuals. I had no way to share with them where they worked in space. So we started creating tools. I'm only going to give you one. There are others. One of them was, when I talked to individuals about space, I didn't know where they worked. So when I was telling, what was your name?
Pavel.
Pavel? I didn't know where he worked. And he said, oh, I immediately know where I work. What this is, and we can give you a download of this too, is I sat down and said, I need to know where a person works in space. So what I did is I drew Earth, and I drew circles like this, and gave them numbers, and that's the moon, and Mars, and the two moons around Mars, and then beyond. And I said, I need to know where you work. And what happened was, as I gave them numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 going out, I could define where someone worked. So Virgin Atlantic, Virgin works in Earth and atmosphere and is considering low Earth orbit. I created language that we can have a conversation about. Because we don't know, most of you, some of you might know what low Earth orbit is, but did you know there's a medium Earth orbit and a high Earth orbit? Did you know there's moon atmosphere? Well, what if we can change the dialogue on Earth? So we started creating tools that allowed people to have conversations about space. And what the realization came is, what if we changed the entire dialogue on the planet about where we live? The reality is Earth and Moon are very much connected. We have tidal waves. And without the tidal waves, we would have never had Earth, they believe that we would not have had any living creatures on Earth. When the tides move out, it allowed the creatures that were forming to have to adapt. The tides went back in, and that kept on growing, and eventually we ended up with life on Earth. So I said to the group, well, what if we started looking at this and calling it MERTH, M-E-R-T-H, Moon and Earth? What if the dialogue we had on our planet started to be a little different? That individuals in schools started to learn more, or in homeschooling or any environment, university, they started to think about where we live in a different context, because we don't live on Earth. We need the context of both of them, and there are resources up there that we could share and utilize as a means of moving forward. I also started to hear a lot about Elon Musk, and Elon has a tremendous, tremendous following. You probably all have read or heard, if you're space enthusiasts, about something that's going on with Elon. But I did the math after hearing his last presentation. Does anybody know how many people he plans on having on the moon, Mars? No, you can't. Does anybody know how many people he plans on having? But he talks about saving the species. In 40 to 100 years, he would like to have 1 million people on Mars. 1 million. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. He's not going to have dogs, cats, whales, giraffes, dolphins. He's not going to have ants, bugs, trees, and most likely none of you or none of the people that you know. That, to me, is not a solution for a species to be following. We have to fix what we have on Earth. And there are different dialogues that we start to have. We're having challenges here. We have global warming. If you've seen any of the maps of how water is rising, we have to solve some of those challenges. What if we looked at the world differently and started to teach our young children that space is part of our world, that we incorporate it into our lives? And I'll share with you later how that would translate into Latvia. Just before we were going to launch this, and this took 3 years of learning of everything, just before I was about to launch this at the National Space Society event in Los Angeles, I watched a video. Now, if I knew this in the beginning, I might not have done it. Imagine Earth is this big. A guy by the name of DeGrassi, who works in the National Museum of History in New York City, takes out a globe, and he says, this is space. NASA says we're in space. We're 3/16 above the Earth's atmosphere in the International Space Station. You might know it as ISS. 3/16 above the Earth's atmosphere. The guy who jumped from space, you've seen that video, the guy jumps from space? Yeah. He's 1/16 above the Earth's atmosphere. Can you see that? No, you can't. You can't see that because it's right on Earth. Now, if for some of you who don't know, the people who have already studied this, where do you think the moon is if this is the Earth? Here, 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 here. Where would you say it is if this is the Earth? Someone point. Not you, you know. Don't know. Somebody, how far? Where would it be if this is the Earth? How far? How far? Do you know how far? Any clue?
1 meter?
1 meter? Yeah, right here?
Yeah.
What would you think? You're all teachers, and when people ask a teacher a question, they don't want to answer. How far? It's 30 feet away. 30 feet, so that's 10 meters? Approximately 10 meters away from here. Mars is over a kilometer away, with the Earth being this big. And it only comes around once every 2 years, where the Earth and the Moon are a 3-day, with our technology today, a 3-day flight. We could use the resources that are on the Moon, carbon meteors and metal and carbon meteors exist on the Moon, and we can have new technologies developed. I didn't realize this, and you probably didn't. In microgravity, particles form differently. So they'd fall apart on Earth because of gravity, but in space, they could form new materials. What if we could use space as a means of working with Earth? Now, here's where it was crazy. I didn't know this after 3 years. No one described how far the Moon was from Earth. And now I'm telling people we're launching Project Moon Hut at a major conference. If I knew this in the beginning, I wouldn't have done it. So I gave the presentation at this event, and everybody loved it. I told them what we were working on and how we were doing and the story. And people started volunteering from all walks of life. Many of them are not science people, not space people. They were volunteering because they wanted to see the dialogue on Earth change so we can accelerate a space-based economy. Just think about this. What if we could have all the electricity we ever need from space, solar energy, that we can use on Earth, and we can have every home heated all winter long and all summer have all the cooling we need? We have technology right now to take some of the methane out of the air. The only reason we don't do it is it's too expensive for the energy to do the process. What if we change that dialogue? So I presented this at the National Space Society event, and we started getting volunteers. People saying, I want to participate, I want to help, what can we do? So we formed a multicultural group. We have people in China, we have people in Latvia. And Paul has jumped on the bandwagon. He loves the education part of our model and our tool, and there's a lot online on projectmoonhunt.org. And he said, I want to bring these concepts to our country. And he started sharing some of the things that he's done, putting up the hot air balloon and filming what was going on. And he said, this country has a small startup community of people in space. What if we can get that to happen across our country, that we can be involved? Now realize, we don't spend money in space. When people say, why are we going to spend all this money in space? I don't know why people ask that question. Has any of you ever seen a cargo container of money, euros, going into space? Have you ever seen anybody ship money into space? Have you? No. Have you ever seen money shipped into space? I have never shipped money into space. What?
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe one day they will, but it'll be Bitcoin or something. It'll probably be digital. We don't spend money on space. Where do we spend money? Now we spend it on and with people on technologies. We do research. It gives jobs and opportunities. So working on space is not about spending money in space. Most of the technologies developed for space never make it to space. They help us here on Earth. So if we can facilitate, if we can move forward with having people have a different dialogue from multicultural environment. I'm going to Israel next. I'm speaking at the Weizmann Institute and then at Technion to talk about the exact same thing because they are interested in participating. So then one day I'm sitting down with this guy, Dennis Wingo, and Dennis wrote a book called Moonrush. He's ahead of his time. And now he didn't like me. Didn't like me at all. He didn't think this was worthwhile. And I'm sitting down with him and I say to him, I don't get what you do. And he says, well, let me share with you, David. And he opens up his screen, he starts showing these videos and these imagery, and I said, oh, you're in spatial logistics. And he looks at me. I said, we do logistics on Earth, we do logistics on air, sea, land, water. You do spatial logistics. He said, that's exactly what I do. But to him, it was just space. I said, we need a nomenclature, and we've been creating a, like biology, phylum, species, kingdom. We've been creating nomenclature for space. And I said, so where do you work? And he says, in space. We take things to the space station. I say, no, you take goods to a space port. We have ports on Earth. We have ports in space. And then I show him the Project Moonhut classification system. And he says, oh my God, I know exactly where we work. We work with asteroids. We work in, and he names his places. And at that point, he bought in. Because the space industry, most people think is very small. It's extremely large. The space industry includes everybody who makes a bolt for space, everybody who makes a sheet metal for space, anybody who designs a book that educates someone about space. They're all in the space industry. But we're so used to thinking of space as the geeks, the people who are science people. It's not. It's every one of you here. And you can make a difference in the fact that we have global warming. You can make a difference with the people, the students you teach, and the way you lead your life if we can incorporate this into our everyday. So Dennis said, I'm into this. And we had this conversation, and we changed it to, there's a phrase called the law of abundance. Is that in Latvian also? Okay. In the world, there are two different types of terminology. There's the law of scarcity, means that we believe that there's a limited amount, so we hold it, we charge more, we protect it. And there's a law of abundance, meaning you can have everything. With space, we could have the age of infinite. All the materials we'd ever need. There is one asteroid that they've identified, there's 14,000 circling around us, worth $27 quadrillion. One. We could change how we live on Earth. Now, I'll be 54. So I have a 23-year-old and a 24-year-old. They're not going to be on that ship, most likely, going to Mars. I want my kids to have a life here. And I'm not giving up. So I have to teach my children about the opportunities. I can guarantee you, most of you, your children or grandchildren, will not be on those ships. Are you willing to help make that change? And if you look around the world, you do know there are 156 million people who live in Bangladesh. And when the waters rise, those people want to move places. We think Syria is bad. 156 million people. In Indonesia, there's 300 million people. When the waters rise, 300 million people will look for new places to live. Coastal waters around the globe, if we go up a half a meter, will change. There will be no Florida. New York will be underwater. London will be underwater at a little over a meter. We can change that by working on something different. So we created this mirth terminology. And we've been now out, and through Paul's, we've decided that we would like to put our flag in Latvia and see if Latvians are willing to step up. Now, why Latvia? Space interest. Someone who lives here, speaks the language. Why Latvia? The country's size, small. So we wanted to do a pilot project in Latvia on our educational side. There are 3 components we're working on. Government, a big data alliance side to help find Caterpillar their partners, those type of companies, and to find their people, new partners, and do a whole big data solution. And one of them is community engagement. And in that, there's 1 billion hearts and minds. We want to touch 1 billion hearts and minds. And Paul's, when he heard this, said, Latvia's the place. I want to start it here. I want to put Latvia on the map. I want to be the country that starts to do something different. So let me share with you a few little teaching moments. Metcalfe's Law. Have you ever heard of Metcalfe's Law? Metcalfe's Law says that the value of a telecommunications network is proportional to the square of the number of connected people in the system. What that means is that if one person has a cell phone, there's no value. If 2 people have a cell phone, there's a lot more value. If 10 people have the cell phone, there's even more value. So the more people engaged in the network, the more opportunities. Well, imagine the more people talking about space-related activities and mirth, and the more people engaged in teaching about this, and it's not going to be science, you'll be surprised the way we take this, you will see that we can create new technologies and solutions for the challenges we're facing today. With artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and 3D printing, there are going to be a lot of jobs disappearing. You've all probably been reading about it. Brexit is because of that. The US voting is because of that. It's happening in China. They're taking factories of 20,000 employees and letting them all go because they're putting robotics in. If you've seen the Mercedes factories, they have no employees manufacturing cars. There's no employees in there. Where are these people going to go? How are we going to create new solutions if we're not changing what we teach and how we teach our future? So what if we were to take Latvians and connect them to Israel's people and connect those people to Maryland's people, and these ecosystems start to grow and they share with one another? What if that happened? There's a guy, his name is Michael Pecht. We were talking about this in an airport on a lounge. He's from Maryland State, the University of Maryland. He's the chairperson. He's going to teach the first undergraduate course, including Project Moon Hut. He's going to teach a course that he has a full course. He's going to take a block, a section, and talk about mirth, talk about space, and how it connects. Now, he teaches a course in electronics, so he's going to do radiation and electronics, talking about space. He's changing his dialogue. So what if we started to crowd think about our solutions differently? You teach another person, you teach a course, and what happens if I could take your course, let's say you develop 3 days out of your whole year to talk about mirth, just 3, and you took that content and put it online, and somebody in Spain looks at it and says, very good, I like the research, I want to use that. And for free, they can go in and take your block and teach it to their students, but they learn some more and they update it. And then that teacher puts it online, and then it goes, and then you see it and you said, I never knew about that. I'd like to incorporate that into my class. What if we can build on everybody's learning very quickly with a learning management system? You've probably read or heard in education, learning management platforms. But we share all the content we're learning and we're teaching to students. What if we shared ideas? You teach a course, say, in history. One of you might be a history teacher. We don't teach space history, do we? Is there anything in history is there a section for 3 days about the history of space? Flying to the moon? What has happened since then? Does anybody teach about these things in the history classes? I never learned about history. History's old. What if we had a block, just a few days, that says, why don't we talk about space history? It's pretty old right now. And we added it into our discussion. The kid says, I didn't know about that. Maybe you'd spark somebody to go home and start to do something. And that person posts something and learns something, and they share it, and that idea spreads. And then that person creates something unrelated to space because they learned about it that is social consciousness in some way. Or maybe that same idea turns into not a business about timers in space, but about climate change solutions. And you can influence by adding a block, a day, a week. Now, I know it's scary. What do you know about space? There's a lot to learn. But what if we were all working on this together? What if we can create ripple effects? Your kid goes home and is excited about something that you didn't think of. Maybe you teach a drafting course and you say, for the next few days, think of how you would draft for the moon. Let's say you're taking a design course. What would clothing be like in the moon? Will it be boring? Will it be a white outfit? Or could we have maybe some flair on the bottom? Because I want to see women look just as good on the moon as they do on Earth. I don't want to see that square shape for everybody. The guys can always wear the square things, but the women have to have a little curvature to it. So what if in class of design and materials you incorporated this? Now, let's do some math. This is the first math I did. I looked up the numbers. There are 4,500 universities and colleges in the United States. What if one teacher taught one course to 10 students twice a year? That's 20 students. 20. We want to reach 1 billion people. But 20 students times 4,500 on every campus, that would be 90,000 students. But do you think they won't share it with their friends if it's something cool? So we could touch 300,000 people just by teaching one course on each campus. Imagine if there were 2 and 3 and 4. And then I looked it up. There's not a lot of good numbers in many places, but the United States has 135,000 educational system, public and private schools. There are 210,000 schools in China alone for elementary school. 210,000. There are 5 million in the world. What if just every one of you touched one of your students with something exciting that had to be different? And they're interested in space, so why don't include it? We can create a ripple effect that moves forward. So then the people in Argentina start talking to the people in Germany, and they start to the people in Latvia, which are in Japan. And young kids today are doing this. If you see them on Xbox, their friends are from not local, they're all over. What if that started to, they all use the same Project Moonhot classification system and a similar taxonomy. They'd start being able to form groups, social groups. Hey, I'm working on the moon. What are you working on? Right now, if you're working on space, there's no way to find people who are like you in space. You have to go to a space conference, and you have to be with space people, and then you do a project for the space conference. And where do all those projects go? Anybody know where all those projects from all these conferences go? Nowhere. Nowhere. Why don't we have every one of those students upload them onto a system so they can share with their friends, and high school kids can teach university students, and university students can get media attention? What if we change the dialogue where all of this becomes collaborative? So we're building a platform to do that. So I went over, we're not spending money in space. We are connected to the working on Earth. And this is what we'd like to ask of you, if you're interested. What if we were to take Latvia and we worked with you heavily? Paul's works with you. You don't know anything about space, that's okay. What if we worked with you and you found other teachers who want to work, and we help you to come up with some course content that you could teach and you'd be willing to share with us online afterwards or during? All your research, like you looked up some websites and you found it, all your notes of where you got it from, and all your class content, and you could put it online. And Paul's would help, along with the Project Moonhot team, we'd help you to find that content and help you design that class. We're hoping that after that, we'd be able to get other countries. We're talking to Israel. They have 250 teachers right now, 250 volunteers who go to elementary schools and teach space-related activities already. Israel is in the top 5 of the Google Learner Prize in the world. They're in the top 5. They have 250 teachers in that small country going and teaching space already. It's not happening in other countries. We'd go larger to more people, and then eventually this will be automated. Everybody will know what to do. So this is how it would work. Not complicated. You agree you want to work with us. You just say, I'd like to try this, something new. I taught at NYU, New York University, for 12 years. I like when my students achieve. I like when students learn. I also want to be excited about the content I want to learn. Well, space is something that I didn't know about. I didn't know about it. So for me, it was just education to learn as a teacher. You would then take your existing course and you'd add a Project Moonhot related piece to it. That's all you'd be doing, is looking at what you do. You'd say, I want to focus on the classification system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or I want to do moon, or I want to do Mars, but our focus is to get a box with a roof and a door on the moon, to accelerate the space-based economy. So we have to be focused on what would it take to get that to happen. Because once it happens, the game's over. And I said they have to go around the moon. The moon is 27 days. So I believe they have to go, it's minus 180 and plus 100 in terms of temperature. So they have to live through that and then come back, at least one of them. This could die. I'm just kidding. They just have to go and be explorers. And then you could pick where you want. If you wanted to do moon-related, it could be the box with the roof and a door. It could be the industrial park. It could be the extended stay. Or it could be community. Whatever you'd like to focus in on. So you pick if you want moon-related or you want to be throughout the entire classification system. And you would this would be an example. I'm going to university setting-wise, but let's say you taught a course in psychology. You could have a space-related component to psychology. For example, who knows what the overview effect is? Your space people? No? Anybody know the overview effect? There have been a little over 550 people who've gone out into space. When they looked down on the Earth, they realized that the Earth is fragile. They saw how thin the veil was around Earth. It's called the overview effect. For the first time, you see everything. Their behavior changes. There's been no 550. What if there was 1 million? What if there were 50,000 people coming back to Earth saying, oh my God, we've got to take care of this Earth. We've got to be different. There's no lines up there that show country separations. We're all the same. What if we taught a course that had a little bit of what it would be like to live on the International Space Station? They just had a guy come back. His brother was on the moon, and he was on Earth. What's the difference psychologically to live on a space station? What if you lived on the moon? What would that be like? What would it be to live on the far side of the moon and never see the Earth? What if you had just discussions about that? Start talking about it and creating conversation with people, getting them prepared. What if we had a course that had to do with history and the history of space? What if we did a geology course and added components about platinum and materials and where they are and added a space component of it? Wouldn't that be neat? And we're not talking you could create a whole class. There are people interested right now in creating full year classes or full semester classes. But what if we had just that? So then we would help you to identify that. You do the research with our help. We're going to have forums and tools that we'll email you and set you up with. You would create your block. It could be a half day. It could be a full day. It could be a week. It could be an experiment. It could be whatever you'd like. It would, with our help, it would value your career because it's changing who you are. You're going to be more current for tomorrow, which is what we're moving into. You would have to look at your videos, your links, your Twitter, forums. We're going to give you all these tools, and you can spend as much time as you want. We're not going to judge you. We just would like you to participate. And in 10 to 15 years, you'll have international exposure because you'll be prepared for what's coming. Because if you're not involved in this industry, it's amazing how fast it's growing. In San Francisco or in the space industry, they're talking about it everywhere. Venture capital is moving into this industry. Your children that you're teaching need to be prepared for tomorrow's jobs and tomorrow's opportunities. So you could do it alone, you could do it with Paul's, you could do it with the team, and you could do it with your other teachers. So I would assume Paul's might get together a group and have him come here and you all talk about what you might teach in a class. Then when you're done, you'll upload and put your information online, and we're working on this platform, it's not done yet. But you'd be able to put it online, and we'd share it. We'd allow another country to take it, and utilize it with other kids around the world. Now, it could be in Latvian. That's okay. If it's in Hebrew, it's okay. It's on there, and someone might translate it, because it's got content or links, because they probably did some searches, and that would save the time and move us forward. You also could be involved in Project Moonhot and helping us to disseminate this around the world because we're getting volunteers all over the world. I mean, I'm going to Israel next, and the guy is connecting me to everybody in Israel that I can imagine. I've got more people that I've got to meet than time that I have in the country, so I'm going back again. And Paul's got all of you together for something space-related. The conversation's out there. So why don't we change that dialogue? And you can create the next, I said you could do contribute with others, become an advisor, or create the next, and I forgot what I wrote.
Blog.
Blog? Okay. It looks like blog. Sometimes I can't read my own writing, but that's okay. I normally say what is on there. Now, you don't have to say, yes, you'd like to volunteer right today. But we would like to get you started because we're going into next year and to start working on this program. Now, there is a big data side. There is a government relations side. There's a lot more that I'm not sharing. You can go see some of it online. What I'm here to do, and this is on my dime, my expense, so that I can be with you and help you, is so that we can change the dialogue. Because when I look to the future, I know that all the things that I'm doing, and whether I'm making money in Hong Kong or I'm making money in South America or making money traveling around, I've written a book, I'm writing some other books, all those things don't matter if our children don't have a future. They don't matter if climate change deniers win, and the waters rise, and we don't have homes, and we don't have places, and we have a choice. It's the age of infinite and infinite possibilities that you can contribute to today. Or we can sit and watch and continue to have the struggles and challenges we have for tomorrow. I'm choosing to play. And I'm not a space person. I still, after 3.5 years, I do not look to the stars every day. I know he does. I'm a person who lives on Earth. I'd like to go to space. I think it'd be fun. I'm willing to try some things. But I probably would like to return home. So I appreciate you taking the time today to spend the time to learn about a possibility of a future that's different. I'm hoping that in your heart you're saying, this could be something a little bit different and fun, and that you'd like to contribute as much as you could. So Latvia is going to be our pilot program. So if we have 3 of you, if we have 10 of you, if we have 20 of you, the more that we have, the more we can help create an ecosystem here, the more you'll change and create more people like this who are willing and investing their time and energy to change the future. So with that said, I thank you for coming.